the Nonprofit Podcast, powered by Donorbox.
You did it. You registered your nonprofit. You know your cause is worthy and your mission is mighty. But how do you bring your message to the masses? Creating awareness of your cause can and often does become the critical factor in your nonprofit's success. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Jena, the nonprofit advocate here at Donorbox. We are here each week with practical actions you can use today to take your nonprofit to the next level tomorrow. Standing out from the noise can be challenging, which is why today I have the joy of sitting down with Zach Thanasilangkul, communications coach and founder of Mission Driven Impact, a training company that helps nonprofits clarify their message to get the word out online to raise awareness of their mission and ensure they make the impact they were called to make. Welcome, Zach.
Jena, I'm so happy to be here. I was thinking earlier, what is our story? I think we connected on LinkedIn and then we shot a few ideas around, more or less literally bumped into each other in a hall in New Orleans at AFP Icon. And now we're here. So I'm stoked about it.
The nonprofit space can seem so big, but it can feel so cool and intimate. And to just coincidentally run into each other in a room full of 3,000 nonprofit leaders was pretty cool. So really, really glad to have you on. I think it's been a long time coming. So tell me a little bit about Mission Driven Impact.
Totally. Well, we help nonprofit founders and executive directors essentially raise more money for their organization through the power of communicating effectively. And so my background is more in copywriting, and I used to run this marketing agency. I've worked in different places. And two things here. One is that we would go in and we would do great work and get great results for organizations. But when we would leave, I would watch them go back to square one. I thought there's got to be a better way to empower nonprofits to permanently build their capacity and not just have to rely on an agency. There's lots of great agencies out there. I'm not hating on agencies, but I just thought, man, there's got to be a way to upskill these people. The second thing would be, I was really thinking about what's the difference between our clients who get really, really good results and the ones who don't, even if we're doing the same amount of work. What's the defining factor? We realized the ones that were great, they had a great strategy and they just absolutely nailed talking about what they do. Whether it was in a conversation with me and the agency, whether it was a conversation with someone else, the conversation that takes place online through websites and social media, everything that we do in marketing revolves around the central skill of being able to talk about what we do. Not a lot of people out there teach it, especially in a nonprofit context. And so I thought, I think that's absolutely something that I got to do. We kind of pitched it as a hypothesis and I ran with it kind of in a little startup mode. We've been getting great results so far. So it's been a blast. I think we're doing exactly what we need to be doing.
I think that this is an area that is so needed to be focused on. And like you said, unless you've got those practical actions to take away from something, it's hard to really see the impact of it. So I see the good work that you're doing, and I'm really, really eager to explore this topic of raising awareness with you today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We all know that starting a nonprofit is an uphill battle. The thing that I wanted to focus on is, while experts can't seem to decide if it's 30% or 50%, this is a huge percentage of newly registered nonprofits that fail in the first 12 months. What do you think are the main reasons for this pretty intimidating failure rate? I mean, it can't be commitment, right? Because most founders are extremely passionate about their cause. Why would they go through all this if they're not committed and passionate?
I mean, I think there's a laundry list of things we could say. I can tell you that I work mostly with people in the early stage, people who are just starting out after getting their 501c3. Oftentimes, just a founder, a pair of co-founders. Sometimes there's a very small team. And so I can tell you what I see from that perspective and having insiders look into that segment of the nonprofit world. What I see a lot is that, every founder knows it, but we don't necessarily want to hear it, that, the responsibility starts and stops with you, right? And there's a reason that we call it the founder stage. You are the captain of the ship, and if the ship doesn't necessarily go where you want it to, you got to look internally. One of my mentors told me that there's no such thing as business problems. In the founder stage, there's only personal problems that get reflected in your business, right? So I think that is something that I see a lot. People don't necessarily embody what it means to be a founder. More tactically speaking, and more on page with what we want to be talking about today, I see a lot of founders, they don't know what to focus on. And so, yeah, they're committed. Yeah, they're working 80 hours a week. But if 75 hours of an 80-hour week is spent on stuff that's not moving the needle, you could have just worked 5. You know what I mean? And then especially, if you're starting to grow your team, if you don't know what you should be focusing on and there's a knowledge and a skill gap that you have, that every founder has, you're going to spread that to your team. And that's just going to break down more and more the more you try to grow. A lot of people try to hire to fix those problems. Hiring isn't the way to fix a knowledge and a skill gap, right? Hiring can be great, but it's not the way to solve that specific bottleneck. And so that's what I personally see in a lot of my experience with that sector.
So, what do you think are the key elements nonprofit startups should focus on when defining their vision and their mission to attract donors and generate this buy-in and this buzz for their mission to avoid these potential pitfalls that could lead to that scary failure rate?
At the beginning, a lot of people immediately start going for grants, for instance, and they encounter some struggle because a lot of grants, private philanthropy, they want to see a long track record of impact, and they want to see the data and the metrics. And if you're just starting out, you probably don't have that. And so
Right.
what do we have? Well, you have to get people super emotionally bought into the mission, right? You have to be able, and this is where your skill in communication as a founder is critical. When you talk to people online or offline, you have to be able to present that vision in such a strong and visceral way where people say, listen, you don't have the data, the track record. I get that you're just getting started, but this is something that I want to invest in. Your early donors are your investors in a nonprofit organization, and investors buy into the vision of the world that you are trying to create, right? And so you've got to be able to communicate that vision in a compelling way with compelling language through things like storytelling techniques, right? Not just the story of what we've done, because if you're in the beginning, you might not have done much yet, but the story about the vision that we were trying to create in the world, right? And that's why having an effective mission and vision statement, among a lot of other things, but that's so critical. And most people get it totally wrong. First of all, most nonprofit leaders don't even know their own mission statement. For anyone listening, if you're a board member or a part of a team, just if you're a founder, especially, go ask anyone on your board or your team. Just say, "Hey, I'll give you $5 if you can, recite our mission statement." And the thing is that if people don't remember the mission or people can't recite the mission, you're not on a mission, right? Everyone's forgotten the mission. And so you got to be able to have something that is strong, that is compelling, that is memorable. Then you have to be able to craft your brand story around it so that your initial investors, your initial donors lean in and they listen and they say, that's something I want to help you build. This is how I can support you to do that.
You've shared some framework for us that can help people through this. Can you talk about the pillars that basically uphold this framework that you call the mission-driven marketing system?
Absolutely. Let me say something first is that, in I think everything in the world today, but especially when it comes to marketing, technology, digital marketing, the world is changing and evolving so quickly, right? And I think a lot of people, especially if that's not your job, if you've got a lot of other things going on, if you're, ED or something, you can get kind of drowned in what is changing. And so I put together something called the mission-driven marketing system. It puts together 3 main pillars that I've observed working in, consulting with, and studying successful nonprofits across the country for the last decade. Because I think that principles don't change. Technology changes, strategies and tactics change. But if you know the principles, you can apply them to wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. So the 3 key growth pillars every nonprofit needs to get the word out and inspire action is you need a clear and compelling message that gets people to lean in and listen and say, tell me more about that. You need a step-by-step donor or supporter journey. That's literally the map, the path that we take people to go from stranger to supporter. And then you need an engaged audience of current and potential supporters who can propel that mission forward. They're eager to hear what you have to say. The way that I break it down is that, it's nice to have these theoretical concepts, but if there's 2 questions that you answer for each pillar, if you answer them well, you put together a simple marketing plan, a simple marketing system that is easy, it's going to work, it is scalable, it is sustainable. So you just got to focus on knowing the answer to those questions and identifying what you need to do in each of those pillars.
It essentially all starts with messaging, right? Going back, how to communicate. That's what we need to do at the very beginning. So what process would you recommend to start refining their thinking? You mentioned some questions that folks can ask. What would those be?
If you want a clear message, you got to know who are you speaking to and what do you have to say to them. You got to understand the person on the other side, because a message is like a bridge that we use to connect with people and invite them into our world. But if you don't understand who's on the other side, it's never gonna hit, right? You're never gonna connect. If you're talking about your donor journey, right? What's the steps that we take people to go from stranger to supporter? You need to know, how will I turn attention into opportunity? We'll talk about how to get attention in a second. How do we turn that into opportunity? And then how do we turn opportunity into action? And let me just a quick aside. Let me say a lot of we're strategic planning season and about to be end of year giving. We're all talking
Yeah.
about donor cultivation. What is it that we're cultivating when we do donor cultivation? Well, the way I like to think of it is we're moving a relationship down a certain journey, right? We're moving a relationship along, but along what path? If you don't have clarity into the journey, if you don't know where you're moving people from and where you're moving to, how effective is your donor cultivation really going to be? It's not. Let's be real. Let's be honest. On my soapbox there. The third point is that if you want to attract an engaged audience, you got to know how to get that attention, right? Attention is currency. And so you need to know, where are my people hanging out, online or offline? Traffic isn't something that you generate, something that you tap into, right? There are already communities of people gathering you want to reach. You just got to be visible. And the second question is, what do I need to do to become visible in that market? So where are my people hanging out? What do I need to do to get in front of them and get in front of them consistently?
I was exploring some of your reels on LinkedIn, and something that really caught my attention, which would be a perfect segue into how will you turn attention into opportunity. You had the most hilarious anecdote about Craigslist and posting an ad and how you can stand out in the right way. And I would really like to talk about how folks can turn that attention into opportunity.
Well, let's talk about it real quick, because I think what it is a note of encouragement for people. And it's something that, as a founder, I needed to be reminded of all the time. When I was first starting, nonprofit founders absolutely need to know, let's just say that the bar is pretty low for you to succeed. Just to be honest with yourself, there are people, I remember someone once telling me, there are people who are way worse at what you do, making way more money at what you're doing, just because they're not afraid to go out and pitch themselves or whatever else. They found it. And so the bar is really low. And that's what the idea of the Craigslist effect is. It's something I learned from Rami Sethi, who's someone I've looked up to for a long time, where back in the day of Craigslist classifieds, innocent woman seeking men posts, and just kind old lady wants to go on a date, instantly be inundated with pictures of a certain type, let's say. And so if you were just to write a basic message, use complete sentences, be nice, you would immediately stand out above. And the Craigslist effect describes situations where everyone else is so bad that just by being half decent, you can stand out. Well, I apply this to nonprofits because most nonprofits totally suck at the basics, even at the level of big organizations. The skill of being able to talk about what you do, the skill of persuasion, right? The skill of having a certain likability factor. These are not things that the nonprofit sector is necessarily known for all the time, right? And so if you can communicate your message really well, if you can just have clarity in terms of what are the steps that we're taking people down, if you can make it easy and not clutter up your website, make it easy to actually make a donation, make it frictionless, use a great platform like Donorbox, to make this stuff great and easy, you're going to be so much better off and so much ahead of the rest.
So I want to go back to these 6 questions. I know that a lot of our nonprofit users at Donorbox, and probably many of our listeners, are kind of in this startup or emerging nonprofit phase. And asking these questions is great. It's great to know that these are the questions that we need to ask, but how do we figure out the answers, right? Who am I speaking to? How does a nonprofit figure out who they want to speak to? How do they figure out where those people are hanging out if they're new and they don't have metrics or data to base that donor persona off of? What can you say to those folks who know that they need to ask these questions but don't know how to find the answers?
Yeah, that's a super, super valuable question. If at the beginning, if all you can do is guess and run with a hypothesis, that is infinitely better than trying to get the answer right. Just guess and run towards it, and you will figure out sooner rather than later whether or not that was a good guess and a good hypothesis. Then over time, we learn how to be more precise. We learn how to get more creative with the solutions and the ways that we can answer these questions. We start gaining data and we learn how to use them to have data-driven decision making. We start to look at other organizations that are working in our space. We start to cultivate relationships, talk shop with other founders, right? We get better and better and more educated and informed about how to answer those questions. So if you don't know where your audience is hanging out, think, here's one big influencer in my space. Can I run a targeted ad there? Or can I collaborate with them in some way, right? Just guess, just go with it. If, what's another example? If you don't necessarily know how to turn opportunity into action, and the way we can think about this, one part of it is making a great ask. You don't know how to make a great ask. The way you learn is by making a bunch of shitty asks. Every successful fundraiser is sitting on a pile of meetings and asks that they just want to forget all about. And it's the same thing for any founder. You got to pitch yourself all over the place. You got to be asking for donations, asking for sponsorships. Get yourself out there. You'll get better and better over time. It's a skill.
I always say, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And I think that taking that chance is much better than suffering from analysis paralysis. You got to start somewhere and you will get better over time.
Something I learned from Brooke Castillo, who is a life coach I really look up to. She says, B- work can change people's lives. And the thing about it isn't just that B- work is quote unquote good enough sometimes. It's that the speed at which you can get B- work out will improve you to an extent that pretty soon what used to be your A+ will be your new B-, and you'll have 80 things out in the world. And the person who waited for that one A+ thing, that thing probably didn't get out in the first place. Quality matters, but really you got to put yourself out there. That's how you get quality. You get quality through quantity, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I know that you have worked on this framework with many of your clients. What are some reasonable metrics or results to see from utilizing this framework? And what would you say is a time frame for knowing whether or not your message is resonating and your donor journey is working as designed? How long do you think this journey can take?
That's a cool question. Just over the weekend, I was putting together something. I think I'm going to call it the ROI roadmap because, some people, you don't always intuitively tie talking about what you do to money comes to the door. And the thing is that when you improve your messaging, some stuff has an immediate impact. Like that very second that you do it, it has an impact, right? Some of that stuff will have an impact in the short term, in the medium term. Sometimes it'll be years down the road. And because you built that foundation right, you're going to get compounding dividends there. And so your messaging pays off in different phases. And it's something that if you invest in it as a foundational investment, it will continue paying off. So let me just answer that in a slice. Something that you should look out for, I would say, is less of a metric, but something that you hear a lot, right? When you first test your message, it's easiest to test it when you're talking and just in conversation, right? Because if you're testing it via email and website, there's a lot of stuff that can skew the data. You don't always know how to make the right decisions there. If you're new to that, then there's just a lot that goes into it. But if I'm just like talking to you, and I hear you say something, let's just say, oh, Zach, tell me about yourself. Tell me about what you do. And I give you a couple sentences and you say, wow, like that sounds really interesting. That's a good marker. So it's those things that we hear. It's like, okay, I know that I'm hitting it right. Now I can back it up with a great marketing strategy to be able to amplify that message. Marketing is a way that we amplify our message. There are microphones that we hold up for what we have to say. And every organization wants the best and the biggest microphone. But a lot of us, we haven't thought about what we have to say when we speak into it. So a microphone that helps you reach 10 or 100 or 1,000 people, it's not going to do any good if you don't know how to have that right message and inspire just one, right? Marketing is how we have the message at scale. And so you have a great message and you back it up with a great marketing system, boom, you're gold. Then it's just a matter of how do we scale it up?
So messaging is in the means here. Comes down to what you do and how you say it. So do you have any quick steps or can you recommend a method to establish the clarity of thinking through all these 6 points you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to thinking about the marketing strategy specifically, right? Because the messaging is part of that. I would just walk through the 6 questions and give yourself a little self-assessment. Really just the questions are, listen, and if you can answer them really precisely, really simply, that's how you know you're off to a good start. So if I say, hey, how do we get in front of people? Or, let's just real life example. I get, if I'm about to sign on a client or something like that, I'll say, hey, what are you doing right now to get the word out? They'll say, we do a little bit of social media, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There's a lot. It's complicated. It's hard to explain. Everyone on the team is doing a little bit of, that's not a good answer, right? I should be able to say, hey, what are you doing to get in front of the right people? Well, I know that my people are congregating around certain interests. I'm able to target it with a very specific ad. We call people out in this way. I lead them to this next step, and then they're off, to the rest of that journey. That's a great answer. That's exactly what I want to hear. Or if I say, hey, who are you speaking to? Oh, yeah, we try to get, our ideal donor is between 20 and 70, live somewhere in the earth, and they are probably like a good person who wants to give to a good cause. That might disqualify a handful of people out there, but wow, big donor base. Everyone's not an audience, right? And so if I say, who are you speaking to? And you can say, the people who are stoked about our mission are people who have come from this type of background. For instance, I'm using one of my clients, they empower LGBT youth entering the workforce. And he said, our ideal clients, they usually have like a spouse or a child who identifies as queer in some way. They're entering the workforce and they have been able to kind of see some of the things they have to go through. And now they think, wow, I want to be an advocate. I want to be a great ally. And so who are we speaking to? We're speaking to people who want to prove to themselves that they're allies. Man, that's a great answer, right? So all that to say, walk through the questions, give a clear, precise, simple answer. Start with wherever you start with. It's okay. We all start in different places. But over time, you want to be crisp about these things and know it like the back of your hand. It should be simple.
So this is a good way to get your vision locked, your mission moving, and then turn your messaging analysis into that framework of your marketing plan. So it's kind of a double dip there. Well, Zach, this was so great. I know we just touched the surface here, but I really appreciate having this conversation with you. And for those of you who want to hear more from Zach, we'll go ahead and link his LinkedIn in the show notes as well.
Amazing. It's been a blast. More to come.
Zach, thank you so much. Starting a nonprofit takes a great deal of commitment, passion, and planning. Zach has taken us from messaging to marketing and 6 easy questions today. There are so many terrific examples to bring us clear, meaningful messaging that engages and grows awareness of your cause. Because if no one knows you're there, they can't support your cause. Those self-assessment questions will be in the show notes. And I know I'm off to work through those myself right now with the honesty that success requires. Thank you for choosing to spend time with the Nonprofit Podcast. I hope you've left with the confidence to take a small step today that will make a big difference tomorrow. Don't forget to download and review the podcast or give it a thumbs up if you're listening to the Nonprofit Podcast on YouTube. Your review is a great way to help others find us. You're here to help others. We're here to help you. Until next time, stay inspired.
That warm feeling when you help someone, it's not just happiness, it's fulfillment. And we believe it should be available to everyone. From frontline heroes to first-time fundraisers, our tools empower you to help others. This is our mission. This is Donorbox, helping you help others.